join soon. Is that okay? I will just summarize what we talked about up until today, and hopefully they will join. So let us start. Up until today, we have covered a lot of ground. We've discussed about backups in general, then we've discussed specific things about bacula, and then we have then took a deeper dive into bacula configuration, discussing all the major directives. And from that, you got a pretty good feeling what bacula can do. We also had a bit of detours discussing things like restores, bootstrap files, spooling, so all the important aspects of bacula functionality. And now we have yesterday managed to wrap everything up and even discuss a bit more in details about pools, idea behind pools, also auto changers and storage spooling. And now we have left only to wrap we have left with the wrap up. And that means discussing all the things around bacula that are really important for you when you implement it. The first thing that you need to be aware of is some things in regards to bacula maintenance. The bacula infrastructure maintenance, most prominently the services that are running. And this will consist of a discussion about upgrading bacula, maintenance of a catalog, and some security consideration. So let us slowly start. So multiple times there, at least once a year, but sometimes even more, we are issuing new major upgrades of bacula. In the meantime, there are minor bug fixes version. This is why we suggest that every bacula customer, either it is a enterprise customer or a community customer, defines some downtime or maintenance interval time in order to be able to upgrade its bacula installation. In the community world, you know that the support is best effort, but in the enterprise world, even this is more stricter because we say that we support you with the newest version of bacula and up to 2 historical versions. What does this mean? This means if you have an issue with your bacula functionalities, we will help you in the enterprise world with all of your problems, but once we reach out internally to our R&D for additional help, they will not work on it if you are running overly old version of bacula. And also, what I've seen throughout the years, most prominently, if you hit an issue, one of the first things that R&D is going to ask us is to suggest that you upgrade bacula to the latest version. Why? A lot of issues are fixed in the meantime. Upgrading bacula to the latest version can be a tricky process if you are performing upgrades in between 2 major releases. Why? Even in between some minor releases, when a major and a minor release numbers change, and those are first and second number divided by dots in bacula version, there is a bacula database upgrade needed. That means that the bacula database upgrade schema has changed, and you will need, as a part of a binary upgrade, also to upgrade the bacula database. In order for you to do so, you will first need to back it up, and then you will need to execute update bacula table script. Update bacula table script is a script that is maintained together with new versions of bacula, and it can be used to upgrade the bacula catalog schema from any of the older versions to the newest one. Okay? If there is a need for you to perform an upgrade in between, to jump more than one version, you will possibly need to run this script multiple times. You don't need to be worried overly because of running of this script, because it will be run automatically during the upgrade process once you try to install the newer binaries. But in that case, you need to be aware that if the upgrade process detects a new version of Bacula catalog database, it will first try to back up the original one. And if it cannot back up the original one, it will fail. So, and the backup of the original database will take place in Bacula working, Bacula working, in the working directory. So if you don't have enough space in your Bacula working directory, the upgrade will fail. So you need to provision for more space. Apart from this, when you perform an upgrade, what we suggest is to perform an upgrade over a test environment. I told you, we do not consider a breach of subscription the fact when you are having an additional environment, when you're having an additional environment but not running it for production backups. So you can use this environment to test the upgrade process. Also, you should read the release notes to see whether or not there is a database upgrade involved, and also what has been fixed in the meantime. How do you check if a production is used for, if the directory is used for production? No. It is on you to know, Young Joe. You should not back up any production data using this director. We, in general, trust the users, but you can see that. You know, when you share the configuration with us, it is seen whether or not this configuration has been actively used or has been used only for tests. No problem there. Okay? If you Is there any way the bacula can disable director? No. Okay, here are the guys from Angola. Admitting Philippe. I'm afraid that you have misunderstood us a bit, Young Joe. When I told you that you can have a production and non-production environment, non-production environment must not be connected to the production environment at all. And this director, when you're not using it for the tests, should be shut down. Okay? So you should not be using it daily, only when you want to test an upgrade or test a new file set. Okay? Okay. So this one should not be used. Hello, Philippe. Good morning. We have started slowly with the maintenance task around Bacula. We are discussing the upgrades. Okay, and then we will continue with the lectures. In any case, once you upgrade Bacula, read the release notes and make sure that you that a database upgrade will be carried out or no. If it's going to be carried out, please be aware that the installation script will try, sorry for this, Okay, sorry for this. So when you need to make sure that whether or not there will be an upgrade of the database, the upgrade of the database will be automatically initiated once you perform an installation, but also make sure that you have enough room in a working directory, because Bacula will try to save the copy of a current database. And also for you to be aware, and it will let you know that it will print out a message, but still you need to be aware that once the upgrade of the binaries is done, the copy of the database is not deleted. So you will need to remove it from the working directory. Okay? Apart from making sure or watching the catalog during the upgrade, you also need to make sure that your catalog is in a good condition. First, your catalog database needs to be properly set up. And nowadays, majority of things that we suggest defining on a catalog database with nowadays installations and nowadays, especially PostgreSQL binaries, is already implemented. But again, take a look at the documentation and see whether or not you have missed on something. Most prominently, make sure that auto vacuum is on. If not, then you need to enable a task to run regular vacuums. Okay, without vacuums, without maintenance, your database will continue to grow infinitely. Why? Because even if you remove entries by pruning or purging, they will not be physically removed until database vacuum is being carried out. Good morning, Innocencio. We are discussing about maintenance routines around Bacula. So, but
Good
the
morning,
first
Alexa.
Good morning. But the first thing that you need to take care of is that you need to have defined retentions and you need to have pruning enabled in order for Bacula to start removing the entries. I told you, Bacula does not delete the entry from the Bacula database. It just, when you prune it, it just marks them as pruned, as deleted, but the physical space is still allocated. So what you need to do, you need to make sure that your database engine performs a vacuum, and then the vacuum will make this space available. A regular vacuum will just make the space available so you can reuse it. Full vacuum will literally shrink the database size, but full vacuums are rarely executed. And if you want to do something like that, please consult with your DBA of the outcome. Some people even prefer not to run full vacuums, but if they want to shrink their databases, they run the regular vacuum, perform they run a backup of a database in a dump, and then drop the database and then recreate it from the dump. It is faster, and it will create an optimal size of a database. Okay? Once you implement pruning, you need to implement retentions. There are 3 types of retentions in Bacula. Once more, those are job retention, file retention, and volume retention. Job retention is the quantity of time for which the records belonging to a certain job will remain in a catalog. If a job record is removed, all the file records belonging to that job are also removed. So job retention needs to be longer than file retention. File retention is the time in seconds for which a certain file related metadata is inside of a catalog. And once you remove file records and you do not touch job records, the restore can be executed, but only a full restore. You cannot execute a single file restore or a restore of group of files if their records have been removed. And the third type of retention is a volume retention. It is time in seconds for which records belonging to a certain volume should be kept in the catalog database. Once volume records are removed, automatically all job records that use that volume are also removed, and all file records that use that jobs. So normally, volume retention needs to be longer than job retention, and job retention needs to be longer than file retention. By default, bacula automatically execute pruning because auto prune equals yes is set in every client. If you want, if this means that whenever a job is executed and finished, bacula will jump in its catalog database and execute a pruning routine. Double check whether or not there are some records that need to be removed. If this is too much of a burden for your catalog database, if you're running thousands of jobs per day, then you should disable automatic pruning by setting auto prune equals no all over the backup configuration, or there is a directive inside of director auto prune equals no that will globally set it and override everything. And then you should create an admin job that will execute the prune command periodically, once a day, twice a day, once in 2 days, depending on your exact use case. Okay? Whatever you decide, please just do not forget to utilize pruning. Oh, yes, Youngdo, I see that you have raised your hand. Yes, yes. Hello? Yes? So, databases are a bit on the strange side, okay? They never remove records until you run vacuum. Vacuum is a process that does not belong to bacula. It belongs to the database itself. So database engine has its own vacuum processes. Nowadays, database engines are set to run vacuums automatically on certain period of time. What does vacuum do? Vacuum goes through the database, detects all the entries that are marked as to be deleted and removes them. Okay? If you do not run pruning, no entries will be marked as to be deleted. So automatic vacuum will never remove anything. By default, automatic vacuum only removes the data that is selected to be removed, but it does not take the space back, gives the space back to the file system. So the database will have the same size, but it will have holes in it. It will have space in it, so you can reuse that space. So by the means of pruning, you're enabling auto vacuum to make room for a new entry in the database. So your database might start growing up to a point, and then it will remain equally the same after a while once the pruning starts executing. Okay? Yes. As something is removed, as something is marked as pruned, then auto vacuum will kick in, and once auto vacuum kicks in, it will enable this space to be reused. If something is marked as, yes? It depends on the database you use. By default, PostgreSQL nowadays has auto vacuum enabled, but if you want, you can disable it and run it manually. But this is not a question for backup. This is a question for database administrator. Okay. So take a look at the documentation, for example, of PostgreSQL, and see of your exact version of PostgreSQL, because bacula is agnostic to the version of PostgreSQL which it runs, as long as as it's not overly old or something beta. Bacula will run over it. You just need to take a look whether or not auto vacuum is set. Okay, I can show you how I can check it, but that does not mean that PostgreSQL will not change this approach in half a year. Okay, so what I can do is something like this with bacula. But in any case, you know, if you need more specific help, please reach out to support. No problem there. So, oops. I jump into B console. Okay, and there is an SQL command. If you jump into an SQL command, you are directly communicating with the database, and I can just say, oof, is it a set? No. Show auto vacuum. Yes. If you say show auto vacuum, it will show you from the configuration of the database engine whether or not auto vacuum is set. Okay? And in this case, it is on. So I know that auto vacuum runs. But if I want to find out more, I need to dig deeper. Okay? But at least I know that I have auto vacuum enabled. How frequent it runs and everything else, it depends. Okay, you need to double check in regards to that specific version of PostgreSQL catalog, for example. SQL query to what? To do what? Sorry. Yes, to do what with the catalog database? Oh, there are. Let me share this with you. There is a documentation here. Here's the documentation again. Okay. You just type PostgreSQL. Okay, and there will be. Oh, sorry. No. No. Postgres. So there will be PostgreSQL catalog administration section. Okay. And there you will see talk about vacuum. Okay. But it is out of scope of this course. I'm just letting you know that it exists, and you can read about that. Okay. There is in the management section PostgreSQL catalog administration, and then there are also talks about catalog backup, vacuum and analyze, cleaning up Postgres catalog database, etc. Okay. Okay. But in general, because bacula is only using the database, bacula is not the maintainer of the SQL software. We only have, I would say, more or less general recommendations what to do with it, but the specific things depend on the database version. So you need to double check that on the site of the vendor, or discuss that with a DBA or with anybody else who is in charge of the databases in the company. Okay. In regards, in that case, also if you have specific questions, you can ask us. We can help you, and we also have, and in regards to PostgreSQL, we have a company that we work with. That company is professionally related, with PostgreSQL, and they offer professional support in regards to PostgreSQL, so we can reach out to them and ask them specific questions. But those are only for something that is highly unique and specific. All the general recommendations are here, and they're in great majority of cases enough for people. Okay? But in any case, you need to be aware that pruning needs to be enabled somehow, needs to be executed, and that vacuum needs to be executed. If one of those does not run, bacula database will continue to grow and grow and grow. Okay, and in one instant, it will be so big and so huge that it will be, it will not be as responsive as expected. Okay? And now a bit about security considerations around bacula. Again, we are not going to get into a deep conversation about this. I will just going to make you aware of some, uh, let's say, most important aspects. Okay? So the first thing that you need to understand is that file daemon must be executed as a root in general to be able to back up everything. That means that file daemon application has a lot of privileges on the host where it runs. So you need to be extra careful, and extra aware of this. That's the first thing. Second thing, I told you we have had uh, developed a lot of mechanisms to contain the number, to contain the commands, to contain the scope of the file daemon, but they are not part of this course. You can read about those in the documentation. Then, because it runs as such, you need to be aware that it can compromise your host. So in general, if your directory is compromised, it can get to your file daemon, and then file daemon can compromise your host, especially if you start executing run scripts using standard backup jobs. Good thing is that administrative jobs do not allow you to execute scripts on the client, but that is not a big of a, let's say, security measure, because you can always create a backup job with a fake file set that doesn't back up anything and use it to execute certain scripts. On the other hand, directory and storage daemon are run as a restricted user, bacula user. So having them on host is a lot less intrusive. On the other hand, if you want to access certain things from the file daemon from the storage daemon or the director, you need to be aware that you will need to allow access to certain user, most prominently bacula, or because it's used by default. If it's changed when you install bacula, then you need to take other users into account. So non-root storage daemon must be able to open and write to a tape drive. Okay, this is nowadays mostly done by adding bacula user to something called tape supplementary group. Okay, and not root style storage daemon cannot always automatically set all drive parameters, so you need to be aware of this. Okay, if you would like to be able to utilize certain specifics about the drives, then you need to be aware that sometimes storage daemon is not allowed to do this, so you need to make certain that it's allowed. And because bacula configuration files are used by bacula daemons, you must ensure that these can be accessed only by those users. Okay. What else is important for you to understand? Bacula nowadays communicates out of the box. All bacula daemons communicate encrypted, okay, out of the box. But even the older daemons never sent passwords unencrypted. They always use CRAM MD5 mechanism to perform authentication initially. And bacula communicates strictly over network in between its daemons. There are no shared files, Unix socket, or something like that. Strictly over network, and the ports are well known. Those are 9101, where the director listens, 9102, and 9103, where the file daemon and the storage daemon list. So you need to protect those from the external threats, but also leave them open from the director side so the director can access file daemon and the storage daemon. This can be done using firewalls or TCP wrappers or both. Okay? What else? So I told you Bacula nowadays sends all the data encrypted using the pre-shared encryption. But also Bacula file daemon can be configured and storage daemon can be configured to utilize additional layer of encryption using the public key infrastructure, TLS encryption. So you can set that up over the initial layer. Then Bacula working directory is pretty special because Bacula utilizes it for all the things it needs to run. It needs to be protected, so it grants access only to Bacula, of course, and the root. And default database script that you use when you create Bacula will grant access pretty, I would say, widely. So if you are not executing Bacula director on the same host as the database, or the database on the same host as the director, and the database is not connected strictly using Unix socket, you might want to reconsider the privileges, the permissions, and possibly narrow it down a bit. But that is something highly specific, and this is where you need to collaborate closely with your DBAs, the database administrators. And of course, the super password, the one that is defined inside of a directory resource of the director, can access all backed up data. Philippe asked the question, can we change the ports used by director file daemon? Yes, we can. In every configuration resource on each of the Bacula daemons, so in the directory resource, in the storage daemon resource, in the storage resource, on the storage daemon, in the directory resource, on the director, and in the client resource of the file daemon, there is a directive that can be used to make those daemons bind to a different port. Also, there are directives in the client and storage resource of the director that can direct director to utilize different ports when accessing those daemons. Everything has been documented. And yes, as Arno tells you, you can also bind the IP addresses on which those daemons listen if you have multiple addresses on a host. In general, having multiple IP addresses on a single host is not such a straightforward thing to have. So me personally do not suggest you build Bacula host as a multi-homed host, but sometimes you cannot go around it. Okay, if you do so, if you have multiple addresses, but you just want to bind Bacula daemons to a certain address, you can do so. There are different directives, dir address, fd address, and sd address in the director file daemon and storage daemon configuration when you can do so. Okay? And the default database backup script, so the one that we produce you with, may expose database password. So if you don't like this approach, change the script. Okay? And I told you about the TLS authentication. And those are all the major security considerations, apart from discussing one additional thing, and that is Bacula on Windows, because Windows is kind of yes, it is changing the configuration files. Philippe, these are the entries. These are the directives that you can use, but we have discussed those directives when we discuss configuration. So, you just revert your slides a bit back in the configuration of a director, in the configuration directory resource of the director, in the configuration of a storage resource of the storage daemon, and the client resource of the file daemon. You will find these directives which change the behavior of the daemons in order for them to be bound only to certain IP addresses. Okay? In regards to Bacula and its behavior on Windows, you know that Windows is always a bit specific, so there are some specifics. First, Bacula creates binaries with all of its versions for Windows almost from the beginning. Okay. We also have created a binary for file daemon. We have a binary for storage daemon created, but only for community. We do not support it because we don't see it's really hard to have a support for something as intensive as a storage daemon running on Windows. Okay, so we will discuss just here file daemons and their behavior on Windows. So Bacula has been tested and certified to work on Windows since version 2003 and upward. Okay, up to the newest versions of Windows. And once you install Bacula, it is integrated, Bacula file daemon, it is integrated into Windows as a system service, okay? So you need to run those net stop and net start command to control the service. And there is also an additional program that is called Train Monitor that can be utilized to monitor the execution of the file daemon. We have 32 and 64-bit versions of it, and there is an installer which you can even run in silent mode, okay, with predefined options. And you need to be aware that once installed, Bacula service, Bacula file daemon service needs to have system administrator privileges, okay? And you can, manipulate them during using these net stop and net start command because it's a service. And you can verify whether or not it's running using the task list command or using the task manager, okay? Bacula on Windows, Bacula file daemon on Windows is identified by its name bacula-fd.exe. Since Windows is pretty picky, okay, in regards to how it allows you to access files, especially system files, creators on Windows are long time ago created an additional layer that creates snapshots of a file system and allows you to back up from a snapshot. This layer is called, or this functionality is called Volume Shadow Service. Volume Shadow Service allows backup of open files and interaction with applications, okay? But there is a catch. The application needs to support Volume Shadow Service. All Microsoft applications do, okay? And there are different levels, different writers with Volume Shadow Service. There is a default file system writer that will allow you, when you initiate it, only to create a snapshot of the file system. But there are also writers for Microsoft Database Engine, for Event Log Writer, Registry Writer. By default, Bacula file daemon has implemented the file system writer. So when you initiate Windows backup with Bacula file daemon, and you remember in the file set enable VSS must be enabled, but it is enabled by default, it will create a snapshot of a file system, okay? But it cannot be used to create a snapshot of a Microsoft database, event log, or registry. For this, you need to have additional functionality. We have a plugin in Bacula Enterprise that is called VSS plugin that offers this functionality. But Bacula file daemon cannot do this out of the box. Out of the box, it can back up only files. How does it work? When you initiate a backup application notifies the operating system, and then the operating system notifies the writer program, in this case, file system writer, okay? And then the writer program creates a snapshot with a consistent state, okay, of the file system, and provides a snapshot view, so a view to that state, and allows you to back up from that view, okay? If you have some applications that do not support VSS, okay, then the file that you're backing up from those applications cannot have guaranteed consistency. Also, because shadow copy needs to be generated every time you back up something from Windows using Bacula, Windows backups have an additional time interval used to create a snapshot. So initially, Windows backup can look like they are not performing anything, but they are going to be in a snapshot generation phase. And then once the snapshot is generated and presented to the file daemon as a consistent view of the file system, the file daemon will start backing up files. Okay? Uh, as I told you, using VSS with Windows is simple. All you need to do is put enable equals VSS equals yes into the file set configuration, or leave everything as default because this is enabled and Linux does not, does not care. You will see in your job log entries like these, status line like these, and you will know that the VSS snapshot is supported and being generated. I think Arno purposely left this line to show us since when we support VSS. This is the first version and the first status line, the status line from the first version of Bacula that supported VSS. It was from 22nd of July, so almost 20 years we support VSS. Okay, and client status with VSS enabled jobs report that VSS backup job has started. Okay. I need to admit Innocentio, and it will report also something like this: which driver is being used and which drive has been backed up. Thank you, Arno, for replying in the chat. Okay. So in any case, you should know that with Windows, you should have VSS enabled because that will guarantee you that you are going to be backing up all the operating system and all the other used files in a consistent manner. You can, as Arno told us in the chat, you can disable VSS and then try the backup, but you will be pretty disappointed with the results. Okay? Because with Windows, once you disable VSS, you are not going to be able to back up anything apart from, I expect, end user data files that are not being used currently. Okay, because any other file that is touched during the execution of a backup will not be able to be backed up. Okay? One more thing apart from VSS, which is pretty important on Windows, is for you to know that Windows Firewall is by default a presence on a Windows system, and you need to account for it when you install Bacula binary. Bacula installation doesn't have the automatic firewall opening mechanism, so you will need to open the firewall after the installation, either manually configuring it through the control panel, or using the GPO policy, or deploy it through AD somehow. But you will need to make provisions for Windows Firewall. What you need to make sure is you need to open a hole on a Windows Firewall that will allow the director to access the file daemon. Okay, so from the director to the file daemon, that is the direction that you need to open, and the file daemon need to be accessed on the port on which it runs, by default 9102. Okay. By default, Windows Firewall are stateful. So if you open one direction, youngly, then the other direction, then the reply will be left open. But what else you need to take care of is that Windows will also, or file daemon will also need to contact the storage daemon on port 1103. By default, Windows Firewall will allow outgoing connection and a reply back, but you need to double check. Okay, so as the last time I played with Windows firewalls, they were stateful firewalls, so they allowed a return connection, return direction to be enabled by default, and they allowed outgoing connections to be enabled by default. But I'm not one of the, I'm not the doing or working with Windows daily, so possibly things have changed. So yes, at the end of the day, you need to make sure that ports 9101 on the director, 9102 on the file daemon, and 9103 on the storage daemon are open internally for your communication. But on the other hand, also guarded externally, so no one from the outside can access those things. Okay? And this This wraps up I would say, talk about bacula on Windows. Okay. And before we continue with the next section, I will call for a break until 10 minutes after 10. So I will place the annotation. Until then, do you have any questions? Although I see that you do not hesitate to use the chat, which is good. It makes things much simpler. Okay. In any case, enjoy the break. I will put up my coffee mug now. And